the way we have been struck by Russian cruise missiles here in Kiev, potentially the Ukrainians have the capacity, when they take hold of these cruise missiles from first the Brits and then potentially the Americans, they could hit strategically essential places like Rostov-on-Don, which is a huge military hub for the entire sector, not just Ukraine, but the Caucasus. It's one of Russia's primary military sites, but potentially a whole range of Russian cities come into play here, and that really will bring the war to Russia's homeland, and that whether it's strategically hitting a military base inside Russia itself, or sending the message that Russia, you are at war with Ukraine, and it is something that from reports that I am getting from internally within Russia, in the media, and I have friends that are reporting from the other side of the equation here, and they tell me that there's a weird feeling in Russia right now of this kind of like, we know we're at war, but we want to pretend we're not at war. We want things to be normal. We don't want to, this is not such a big thing. Well, if cruise missiles start hitting targets internally within Russia, they won't be able to deny that they're at war anymore. The facade will disappear. And that might be real trouble for Vladimir Putin.
As a career wide receiver, I've been hit hard. But no training nor practice prepared us for the devastation of COVID-19. Thankfully, there is hope. Even with multiple vaccines available, we still have to work together until everyone is safe. We all win when we unite to prevent.
Hey all, Glenn Kirschner here. I hope you'll join me on my new audio podcast, Justice Matters. I'll be using my 30 years as a federal prosecutor and Army JAG to unpack, break down, and explain the legal issues of the day, particularly where the legal intersects with the political. Please look for Justice Matters with Glenn Kirschner wherever you generally get your podcasts.
I'm Chef Shanti, and today I'm going to show you my version of mozzarella stuffed arancini.
Welcome back. The venue, crowd, and format for the CNN town hall with Donald Trump still has people asking if the network made a major mistake. Here's Rick Smith and his guest with their thoughts.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
Trump is appealing the $5 million judgment that was awarded by the Manhattan federal jury in the E. Jean Carroll case. And she, equally not surprising, is considering suing Trump again after the town hall statements. So, this is what Trump thrives on, this kind of chaos. And I got to tell you, I think Biden's right. Do you really want do you want 4 years of that? Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the big CNN town hall. I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come talk with us. Sarah's a reporter over at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us. So, gut reaction to the Dog and Pony show?
It was stupid, first of all. My theory is that they will probably end up losing what few viewers they have left, because they've alienated them so much with this BS. And it feels sort of like 2016, when nobody really knew how to cover Trump, and it was like Collins tried to fact check him in real time, but he just talked over and it didn't really work. And I just sort of feel like we're coming back again to this thing, and it's like, we have been here before, we figured this out before. Why is this, like, why are you trying to do this again? Because it didn't work.
Yeah, I found it funny that he did the nasty woman thing again, didn't he?
Yeah, I was surprised. Which, it's weird because, I mean,
she was a right winger. She was a Tuckerite, wasn't she?
That's what I was gonna say. She was at the Daily Caller, and I mean, she just seemed very calm and rational the whole time, and that piece of it seemed like the biggest contrast to me, where he just seemed like, "Blah!" and she was, like, trying to be the adult in the room.
How was he again?
Blah! The thing that's been so interesting now is this afternoon, her lawyer's saying that they're looking at whether or not to sue. And I think it makes complete sense for them to sue him again for defamation. But the question that I have, too, is whether she can also sue CNN for platforming this guy. Because to me, it seems like the same case as the Dominion issue, where CNN knew he was going to lie. They knew he was going to say stupid stuff. They did nothing to fact check it in real time.
Yeah, but in their defense,
across the screen.
In their defense, she did try to push back. It wasn't, the Fox thing was a little bit different, where they were cheerleading it. The argument I think that CNN would make is she tried to push back. She just got steamrolled.
See, I don't know if that works. Because still, you get an opportunity to throw up a chyron, right? And just be like, this is a lie. This is a lie. This is a lie.
Big flashing.
Right? I just feel like that is a unique opportunity to just run the fact checks along the bottom of the screen underneath him.
What was that guy's name? Chuck Burris. Do you remember Chuck Burris? The old, maybe you're not old enough, the old Gong Show. Where they had Mean Gene, the dancing machine, and if your act was bad, they would hit this big gong and they'd had a hook that'd pull you off stage. They should have done that.
There you go. I remember the SNL guy who would do the top headlines for the hard of hearing and would scream. That's sort of how I feel about trying to teach Trump people anything, is you need somebody in the lower corner who's just screaming things at them.
No, but here's the thing. Did that move the needle at all? I mean, I got exactly what, before you turned it on, I knew exactly what was going to happen. I knew exactly how it was going to turn out. I knew how the red hats and the blue hats were going to react. There's nothing new here. We're just recycling. This is like a bad rerun.
Yeah.
This is like a bad sequel.
Rerun. And I do think that the one difference is that it gave Joe Biden an opportunity to, like you said, come back and be like, really, you guys, we want to do this again? And I think that was his big message in 20, right? Is he was just like, can you handle another 4 years of this?
You want this?
And I mean, I wonder how many people are, that are not in the political the politierati, the politically involved and the activist culture. I wonder how many of those people remember what that was like and how exhausting it was to just be like, are we at war? Is somebody going to kill us? Like it was one day to the next. So hopefully that has reawakened some people, but they weren't watching last night.
No.
Those people are the ones who just caught the news of it this morning, and the news was really bad for Trump.
Oh, it's really bad. And, because a lot of the things that the positions he took aren't popular with the local poll, the recent polling. I take the Putin's not a war criminal. I mean, 80% of the people in the Quinnipiac poll think he's a war criminal. Trump's like, no, he's my buddy. We're pals.
And the other problem is that you have a lot of Republicans in the Senate, like big Republicans. Even Lindsey Graham is catty his golf caddy, who was just like, yeah, no, that's not true. And there's only so much that Lindsey Graham can BS, right, about something Donald Trump says, where he's just like, well, what I think he meant was, and you're just like, I don't think you can squirm out of this.
Yeah. Not even Foghorn Leghorn can bail him out of this one.
Yeah.
No. But, the one thing that caught my attention out of all of it, and that I was really surprised by, if you could say anything, is that he took credit for overturning Roe. That to me actually threw his justices under the bus, because we all knew, and look, we had talked about this during the confirmation processes of all of the Trump appointees, that we all knew that the first chance they got, they were going to overturn it. We all knew that they were BSing. We all knew that Susan Collins was full of it. We all knew. He just confirmed what we all knew.
He did. And I think that is the piece of it where Republicans have kind of tried to walk away a little bit and hide from it, because now we're seeing all of remember all of the times where we were talking about the worst case scenarios and all the bad things that would happen, and everybody's like, you're being hysterical. And it turns out that those are all true.
Yeah.
All of those terrible things are happening. And so now Republicans are like trying to hide under the covers to pretend like, oh, I didn't mean for that to happen. I didn't want, women having miscarriages to die. And it's like, well, we told you this would happen. And Trump basically came out on stage and said, hey, it was me. I did all of this. And I think the reason he did that is because he's losing evangelicals like crazy.
Yep.
They've got another option for somebody who is just as much of a lunatic, but hasn't had 7 wives and screwed half of New York in a dressing room against their will. So I think that they are trying to flee from that, and he's got to figure out some way to get them back, because otherwise all he's got is, the militias and the disaffected.
Yeah, the white supremacists. Yeah. And that's going to be enough to get him through the primary, though. And this is what I think Democrats are hoping for, that he gets enough of the crazy wing of the Republican Party to make him the nominee, and that it'll be an easier time for Biden. And even look, I found it interesting today that even on the right wing Twitters, they were saying Democrats want Trump because they think that Biden can beat him. The polling show Biden ahead of Trump, but I think that even the right understands that to be the reality.
Yeah, and I think that is going to end up being, if DeSantis gets into this thing, that's going to be a winning message for them, but for him. But he also is in this very awkward position where he can't alienate the Trump voters either. So he's got to play this funny balance of, he's the guy who's going to lose. I'm the guy who can win, but, he's not the bad guy. And I don't know how you do both of those things at the same time.
No, I found it interesting. And look, that he went to CNN. One of the arguments that I've gotten a bunch of people emailing me, Joe Biden would never go on Fox News and take that kind of thing up. And I'm going, probably not. Because why would you subject yourself to this? Trump thrives in chaos. He wants this because, hey, he's going to get attention. And look, we've spent the last 10 minutes talking about nothing but Trump. This plays to him, doesn't it?
Well, the thing is that I think Joe Biden would go to Fox News if the rules were exactly the same. What happened with Donald Trump is basically he was doing what CNN called a town hall, but the reality is Trump bought in all of his own people to be the town hall audience. So the people who were asking him questions were his own people. They were all MAGA people.
If you got a question for her,
if Joe Biden did that, and brought his own people into Fox News, they'd lose their mind. Everybody would be like, oh, he's a coward. He won't answer real questions. But that's exactly what happened to Trump. And to me, again, like, that is not a town hall. That is, a glorified, expensive, free advertisement for Donald Trump.
Yeah, no, it absolutely was. And look, that's why he went. And for me, a town hall is, some kind of, bipartisan. This was a set up, staged audience from the very beginning. But the other thing that got my attention, and you're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Sarah Burris. Sarah's a reporter at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website, if you want to check out the work that she does. The other thing that was a little surprising, because Trump had always said, the debt ceiling thing was stupid. Why wouldn't you raise it? It's bad for business. And I thought the one consistent thing that I thought maybe he was going to bring was this business person's perspective that no, this is bad. We can't default. It's going to be bad for Wall Street. It's going to be bad, and we shouldn't do it. But he didn't. He went full on. I don't give a rat's behind about the country or anything else. The heck with Biden. He called for a default. He wants to shoot the hostages.
But that makes sense because he's not going to lose anything from it. The two parties are not Trump and Biden. The two parties are Kevin McCarthy and the Republicans and Joe Biden. And, when Trump had the option to raise the debt ceiling with Republicans, he did it no question. When it was the turn of Democrats, he demanded that they fund his wall before he would agree to raise the debt ceiling. And, I think Democrats agreed to give him like $5 and a can of jelly beans or something. But it wasn't even close to what he'd asked for. And I think the issue with Biden is that he's so furious, I think, because of the debt crisis that he had during the Obama administration, which until Trump came along was the longest government shutdown.
Right.
And I think Biden is just like, I'm done. Like, we can negotiate on the budget. I am absolutely fine negotiating on the budget, but raise the debt ceiling. Come on, just do it.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. We are radio of, for, and by we the working people. Check out our program at thericksmithshow.com.
Hey all, Glenn Kirschner here. I hope you'll join me on my new audio podcast, Justice Matters. I'll be using my 30 years as a federal prosecutor and Army JAG to unpack, break down, and explain the legal issues of the day, particularly where the legal intersects with the political. Please look for Justice Matters with Glenn Kirschner wherever you generally get your podcasts.
Republicans say they won't cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. But can honest, hard-working middle-class Americans really believe what these politicians say? Republicans said they wouldn't overturn Roe v. Wade. Here's what Supreme Court Justices Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Coney Barrett said during their Senate confirmation hearings.
Roe v. Wade. It is a precedent of the United States Supreme Court. A good judge will consider it as precedent of the United States Supreme Court.
Roe v. Wade. It's settled as a precedent of the Supreme Court.
Roe is not a super precedent, but that doesn't mean that Roe should be overruled.
Well, we saw how that turned out. They played us for fools. Tell your elected officials to keep their hands off of our Social Security and health care benefits. Fool me once. Let Majority Rule was responsible for this message. LetMajorityRule.org is a project of the Marvin Lucas Super PAC, which is responsible for and paid for this ad and is not affiliated with or authorized by any political campaign or candidate or candidates committee.
In this segment, Stephanie Miller welcomes Glenn Kirschner to the program. Together, the two look at the E. Jean Carroll case and wonder both if Trump's comments about the plaintiff after the guilty verdict could cost him once again, and what this verdict might say about other cases coming down the pike for the Donald. Here's Stephanie.
Go ahead.
It was an ill-advised decision, I think, by CNN to give a mic and a platform to somebody who tried to violently overthrow our democracy, stop the transfer of power, run roughshod over the expressed will of the American voters. That being said, there was incriminating evidence from heaven in there. And I just want to use one example to put the finest possible point on it. You know, Donald Trump can lie with impunity at a town hall. He can do it for fun and casually and cavalierly. But let me tell you exactly what a prosecutor will make of just one of his lies. When Caitlin Collins asked him, why did you ask Brad Raffensperger to find you votes? Here is his precise answer. Quote, I didn't ask him to find me anything, close quote. Here's what a prosecutor will do. You put government exhibit sticker number 1 on that audio clip and video clip. I didn't ask him to find me anything. You put government exhibit sticker number 2 on an audio clip from that recorded phone call where he says to Brad Raffensperger, find me 11,780 votes. When you put those 2 clips right against one another, the jurors will start rolling their eyes and they'll be looking at their watches saying, when can we get back into the deliberation room and vote guilty?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as we were talking about, the other thing is the documents, right? I mean, the whole documents thing. How did NBC put it? Trump's lawyers told Congress the classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago were there by accident. When questioned about the issue at the town hall, Trump he said he had every right to take them from the White House. Would that be Exhibit B, C?
Well, interestingly, the statement of the lawyer is not the sin of the client. What I mean by that is we can't, as prosecutors, introduce lawyers' statements and then say, aha, the client contradicted his lawyer. What we can do is introduce Donald's statement into evidence when asked, did you show anybody these documents? He said, not that I recall. I don't think so. We're talking about our nation's secrets here. And what you could tell in that answer was that he did show people the documents. Jack Smith, I'm quite sure, will be able to prove he showed people the documents. So we can introduce that town hall statement as a lie, a cover-up, and consciousness of guilt. So there's always a way to use his incriminating statements against him.
Let's talk about E. Jean Carroll, who has indicated she may sue him again. I said that yesterday. I mean, the fact that he defamed her again right after a day after being convicted of defaming her. One tweet I wanted to ask you about. He declared he wanted to confront her, but Trump did not dare come to court to speak under oath. He instead used national TV to slander her. This makes it intentional harm. Just talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I think the only question for E. Jean Carroll is, does she want to now bring another suit and spend the next couple of years, you know, beating the pants off of him again and winning another enormous money judgment, which she undoubtedly will. I mean, it is pretty staggering that the jury awarded her punitive damages. What are punitive damages? They're designed to punish the defamatory statement and to deter Donald Trump from making future defamatory statements. And 24 hours later, he goes out and he does it all over again. So she will absolutely have a successful defamation suit if she chooses to bring it. And it really is up to E. Jean Carroll. What does she want now? Does she want to spend more years in court, or does she want to just take the $5 million and kind of move on with her life? But I'll tell you, I think the nation sort of gives her a warm embrace for really being the first person to take down Donald Trump and hold him accountable for his misconduct.
Yeah, I said yesterday, it feels like justice is on a bit of a roll. I know we're impatient, but, you know, I thought it was interesting. You tweeted, it was yesterday, you said there is a way to deal with Trump's provable lies designed to poison future jury pools, a narrowly tailored limitation on his speech and his posts. At some point, our institutions of government must push back on Trump's dangerous rhetoric before it's too late. And, you know, on cue, judge orders Trump to attend a lecture on how not to violate evidence disclosure rules, which I'm sure is going to go down fabulously with him. But it's going to be by video, right? But he will have the rules explained to him, which I'm sure he knows. He just doesn't follow them, right?
No, he doesn't follow them. And the reason the judge is doing that, I haven't seen any reporting. I have seen some chatter about this lecture that Donald Trump must attend. The reason the judge is doing that is so the judge will have all of the evidence he needs that Donald Trump was specifically and personally on notice of these requirements and restrictions, such that when he violates them, it will be very easy for the judge to impose a sanction, which could include stepping him back because he will have proven that he can't comply with the court's conditions of release. So there's definitely a reason to do this beyond just, treating Donald Trump like a third grader.
Yeah. Well, obviously, as I was mentioning, some legal experts talking about, they think this town hall will accelerate Jack Smith's timeline. I want to get your take on that. But you also mentioned about the, where is it here? Oh, a mole at Mar-a-Lago, person who works for Trump becomes confidential cooperating witness for prosecutors. That obviously was already in motion. What do you think the town hall does or doesn't do time-wise?
I sure hope it accelerates the accountability clock because, the longer the Department of Justice goes, allowing him to spew his lies, allowing him to portray what's going on as a witch hunt or some sort of political retribution, the more people absorb that message and think, well, DOJ hasn't done anything against him for years, so maybe it really is a witch hunt. Maybe it really is all about politics. I saw such a disheartening post where somebody said, there are a whole bunch of young people and students who are asking themselves, well, is Donald Trump, has he really done anything wrong? Because DOJ hasn't brought a single charge against him. So maybe the whole thing really is a witch hunt. This highlights the need for not just law enforcement staff, but timely law enforcement. And that is what has been missing when it comes to Donald Trump.
Well, look at the first Biden ad that's using the town hall. I mean, you must have just, I can't even imagine, your legal brain must have just imploded. His whole retelling of January 6th, that was beautiful, and Patriotic Day, and, he's going to pardon all of them, and maybe just a couple of them got out of control. I mean, I talk about a different version of reality. Hundreds of people have already been charged and pled guilty, right?
Right. And the insurrection has happened now more than 2 years ago. So if there was really a crime committed by Donald Trump, wouldn't DOJ have indicted him? This is the message, unfortunately, that is beginning to resonate with people. That's why, again, I hope the town hall accelerates the timetable for accountability, because at some point, DOJ, I know they always want to investigate things exhaustively and to perfection so they can present a bulletproof case to the jury. But at some point, they have to pull the trigger and begin indicting Donald Trump.
Yeah. By the way, here was another reason why I wish you were AG. You said, I've cross-examined RICO defendants and lots of murderers. Crossing this orange windbag would be a walk in the park. There's no two sides to treason. Yes, that's again, just the fact that CNN gave a platform to someone that has, you can start even list the things, right? Treason, overthrow of the government, espionage, sexual assault, to spin his version of reality. Of course, on Q this morning, Trump praises very smart CNN for giving him a town hall. Many minds were changed because he mostly unchallenged to a whooping group of his fans who apparently think rape is really funny, right? I mean, that was what was so disturbing about it.
He sends a signal, especially to the younger generations who are paying attention, that, abusing women is kind of cool and kind of neat and something to be laughed at, not something to be fought against. Again, you can't lock him up soon enough and begin holding him accountable for these crimes. He's already fundraising off of CNN's logo by making it TNN, the Trump News Network. And, enough is enough.
Yeah. Let's talk.
Entirely effed. The first thing I did was I pulled out my big, ugly blue book of federal laws, the United States Code, to try to do a quick calculation of his maximum statutory punishment if he's convicted on all 13 charges. I came up with 190 years. So, maybe with good behavior, he gets paroled when he's 207 years old if he's convicted on everything. Of course, the sentencing guidelines will come in much lower than that. But what did he begin? Motivated hit job by a Democrat-controlled administration, which it's not, right? He's the great pretender. Proving that he committed these crimes will be extremely easy for prosecutors because a lot of them are paper-driven. You're going to have paper exhibits, not people coming in and saying, saying, I saw George Santos do X, Y, or Z. So, again, we need to set the right tone. We need to make timely law enforcement a priority. We need to get Donald Trump, and we need to just kind of deflate this witch hunt balloon.
1 out of 5 young people struggle with disorders like depression, dyslexia, ADHD, OCD, eating disorders, and anxiety. Every one of us knows and loves one of these kids. For expert information and free resources, visit childmind.org.
All right, so who's up for a great bottle of wine? Well, according to a recent survey, about 62% of the country is ready to raise a glass. But how do we decide what it is that defines a great wine when all of our palates are so uniquely different? Imagine a fun and interactive process that actually takes your preference into consideration, allowing you to create, design, and even package a wine that's right for you, your event, or clientele. Welcome to Blentique Wine Company, and welcome to your wine. Blentique invites you to participate in a revolutionary new process whereby the everyday consumer can create and design a personalized wine blend from the comfort of home. Whether blending is an individual, date night activity, wedding party, or restaurant tour, our one-of-a-kind system helps put the power of creativity back into the only discerning palate in the room that matters, yours. Welcome to Blentique Wine Company, and welcome to your wine.
Republicans say they won't cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. But can honest, hard-working middle-class Americans really believe what these politicians say? Republicans said they wouldn't overturn Roe v. Wade. Here's what Supreme Court Justices Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Coney Barrett said during their Senate confirmation hearings.
Roe v. Wade, it is a precedent of the United States Supreme Court. A good judge will consider it as precedent of the United States Supreme Court.
Roe v. Wade. It's settled as a precedent of the Supreme Court.
Roe is not a super precedent, but that doesn't mean that Roe should be overruled.
Well, we saw how that turned out. They played us for fools. Tell your elected officials to keep their hands off of our Social Security and healthcare benefits. Fool me once. Let Majority Rule was responsible for this message. LetMajorityRule.org is a project of the Marvin Lucas Super PAC, which is responsible for and paid for this ad and is not affiliated with or authorized by any political campaign or candidate or candidates committee.
In today's Middle East, the issues are getting more complex and the noise is getting louder. It takes a lot more to really understand what's going on. Al Monitor has established itself as an independent and trusted pulse of the Middle East, providing angles that you won't see anywhere else. We have committed to hiring hundreds of the top journalists and experts from across the region to keep our audiences up to date on the latest news and the trends to watch for. Decision makers on foreign policy and international business, global media, and top regional authorities regularly read Al Monitor, making it a one-stop shop for gaining a better grasp of the Middle East.
أضاف عبد اللهيان في تصريحات لموقع المونيتور.
With the launch of Al Monitor Pro, we're using our expert network and new data sets to offer premium, actionable insights on regional trends to business and policy professionals around the world to help them do their job better. Join our community as we continue to grow.
But Jim, before we turn towards the legal travails of the former and perhaps even the current congressman from New York, George Santos, I want to ask you about the Title 42, I think it's called, the expiration of this Trump era policy, this COVID policy. And Jim, there are 130,000 immigrants sitting on the border. To hear Fox News tell it, we are under attack, we are being invaded. Legally, Jim, what's the solution? I mean, how do we put, the genie back in the bottle?
Sure. The solution, one that should have been enacted decades ago, is the United States Congress that has not done something to do comprehensive immigration reform, and as long as I can remember. There have been proposals. And I remember when I was U.S. Attorney, there was a package put together, bipartisan support, anticipating that it would go through committee, would get the approval, would get the president's signature on it, and it never happened because we fell apart over not necessarily small things, but things about which reasonable people can differ. We haven't done it. And so we do have a crisis. We're not about to get invaded. There are large numbers of people there in the wake of Title 42, effective 12 o'clock last night, with the removal now of our status under the pandemic. We go back to Title 8, which is where the law was before that. The Biden administration has appropriately recognized that this is going to be a challenge. The Secretary of Homeland Security putting in place some proposals here that have to do with the ways in which we can most methodically get these folks administered. There's an app for doing that. There's a regional processing centers. This is not easy, and the Secretary acknowledges that. But again, we need long-term, we need congressional action on this, and shame on both parties for not doing this for years and years. We continue to suffer in the wake of that inactivity, and that's the real source of the concern.
Well, I think there are some more culpable than others, and I would point towards the last action of the Gang of Eight when they tried to get together and they tried to bring forth comprehensive immigration reform. Well, it was killed by the Republicans. It was killed by Marco Rubio, and he was one of the co-sponsors of the bill. He wrote the damn thing, and then he opposed it, Jim. So, I know you're a very generous man, but this is an FU Friday kind of a show, Jim. Let's call a spade a spade. It was more the Republicans, but sure, over the history since Reagan's amnesty in the 80s, yeah, both parties have been in charge, at least for some period of the time.
And you're making reference to specifically the event that I recall well, sitting at Main Justice, talking to people. Again, we're not involved in legislation as U.S. attorneys, but anticipating changes in the immigration law for enforcement purposes. We thought this was going to happen. And then, yes, that's absolutely right. Between the senator from Florida, other people deciding, nope, we can't have this happen. Under the Obama administration, we backed off, and everything follows from that and precedes that as well. Doesn't get us into a better state today, but that's the problem. I applaud the Biden administration for doing everything it possibly can. I recognize the ACLU is not particularly happy with the ways in which this is being rolled out. They filed a lawsuit challenging some of the trappings of this. It is hugely, hugely problematic at all levels. We've got to be focused upon humanity. We've got to be focused on the law such as it is. Got to do staffing. We've got to be thoughtful about law enforcement. Everything's got to be on the table. It's long overdue to do something about this problem. Now it's going to be back on our docket once again, and we're going to make it a political crisis once again, which it should not be.
Our fine guest, James Santel, former U.S. Attorney. Jim, I hadn't heard the despicable term anchor baby until today again. It had been a while, but suddenly we're back to talking about anchor babies. And I heard callers on right-wing talk radio talking about the 14th Amendment and birthright citizenship and the concept that so many of these immigrants are really just coming here to birth babies so they can be U.S. citizens. And I'm thinking, well, that's been the way. I think there was a legal decision in the 1890s that cast it this way, Jim. But don't we want people born here in this country to be citizens of this country? I'm less clear, other than the fact that Fox News makes a lot of money and drives a lot of ratings, making people fearful. I'm not sure why we are ginning up such fear of assimilating more Americans, those born here even.
Absolutely. And the law, the Constitution is clear. That's the basis of how much citizenship is premised. In part, you can also get it, obviously, through other appropriate mechanisms. That's what our country has been founded upon. And beyond the legal trappings of it, we desperately need immigrants. We need people to come to this country, not only for our workforce, but for our social well-being, our cultural well-being. It adds to who we are as a nation. And this notion, once again, that being espoused absolutely by those conservative talk show hosts and others out there, that somehow this is a battle that we now need to undertake, and we're going to somehow, affect the future of our nation. No, this is what the future of our nation is dependent upon the growth and development of our population, both for those citizens and residents who are here and those who are coming here properly in the future. I should note as well that the Constitution of the United States of America does not just apply to citizens. The Supreme Court has said this routinely, that all the protections in that Constitution do not simply apply to citizens. It is people in our nation. And that's why the courts have traditionally, in all sorts of due process settings, equal protection settings, have said, even if you are not even here legally, if you are not a citizen, you still benefit from the provisions of the Constitution and the good things that are the United States of America. We need to remember that in the midst of this vocal objection to what will probably not be happening here in America.
Folks, you're listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. That is James Santel. He's a friend of ours. He's a former U.S. attorney. He's host of Morning Cannolis here on the Civic Media Network, Saturdays from 9 to 11 a.m. Jim, thank you. It's always great to see you. Let's get to some of the legal issues, problems for the former president. Of course, this week, E. Jean Carroll, a jury, including some folks who apparently admitted to listening to right-wing podcasts, unanimously found Donald Trump liable for sexual battery in this civil case, and also for defamation. Want to get a couple things from you, Jim, if I may. Number one, your thoughts on the verdict/decision, I guess. And number two, the defamation. Donald Trump went on CNN saying the same kind of things he just got charged or found liable for. Again, Jim, is there a second case? So you go.
Right. At that point, prompting E. Jean Carroll and Roberta Kaplan to be suggesting that maybe there will be another case because we've done it again. And again, I will say that his lawyers, I'm not especially fond of them to begin with for all their antics in this trial, have to be going nuts and trying to control their client. As to the verdict itself, absolutely unanimity, civil trial, and also notable, 6 men, 3 women found based very quickly, about 3 hours, found based upon the evidence presented to them that an event happened over a quarter century ago. That is a remarkable thing to be able to prove that in court. She did it by virtue of her very compelling testimony, graphic, specific about what happened to her, corroborated by people to whom she reached out after it happened, corroborated by at least 2 other women who are also among the 2 dozen women in this nation who maintain that they've been sexually abused, assaulted by the former president. Also, the verdict is a result of Donald Trump's own words in his deposition, and doubling down, I think very importantly, very significantly for this jury, on the Access Hollywood notion that, yes, that's what you do. He had the chance in that deposition to back off of that language and say, oh, no, I was just talking to Billy Bush on some 6:30 event television show, but he didn't. He said, no, that's exactly what we do. And I think more than anything else, that affirmation, he didn't testify himself, that affirmation makes the credible presentation by E. Jean Carroll very compelling. Obviously, the jury agreed with that, returns this verdict. She's got $5 million, and she can enforce that. She can enforce that. We'll look forward to that happening.
When we come back, Thom's final take on Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas.
Republicans say they won't cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. But can honest, hard-working middle-class Americans really believe what these politicians say? Republicans said they wouldn't overturn Roe v. Wade. Here's what Supreme Court Justices Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Coney Barrett said during their Senate confirmation hearings.
Roe versus Wade. It is a precedent of the United States Supreme Court. A good judge will consider it as precedent of the United States Supreme Court.
Roe v. Wade. It's settled as a precedent of the Supreme Court.
Roe is not a super precedent, but that doesn't mean that Roe should be overruled.
Well, we saw how that turned out. They played us for fools. Tell your elected officials to keep their hands off of our Social Security and healthcare benefits. Fool me once. Let Majority Rule was responsible for this message. LetMajorityRule.org is a project of the Marvin Lucas Super PAC, which is responsible for and paid for this ad and is not affiliated with or authorized by any political campaign or candidate or candidates committee.
1 out of 5 young people struggle with disorders like depression, dyslexia, ADHD, OCD, eating disorders, and anxiety. Every one of us knows and loves one of these kids. For expert information and free resources, visit childmind.org.
As a career wide receiver, I've been hit hard. But no training nor practice prepared us for the devastation of COVID-19. Thankfully, there is hope. Even with multiple vaccines available, we still have to work together until everyone is safe. We all win when we unite to prevent.
This is a story that got virtually no coverage at all, but we need to know about this stuff because it's really, really critical. The Supreme Court accepted a case. They're going to hear a case. We're not sure exactly when, but presumably, well, we'll see. Presumably in the fall, and then they'll issue an opinion presumably in the spring of next year. But it could all move much, much faster than that. And if they rule the way it looks like they're going to rule, if they rule based on things that Neil Gorsuch has said, things that Clarence Thomas has written, things that, and the West Virginia versus EPA case that the six Republicans on the court, the 6 corrupt Republicans on the court all voted for, to prevent the EPA from regulating carbon dioxide. That was just last year. If they rule the way that we think they are, then the EPA will no longer be able to regulate polluters. The U.S. Department of Agriculture will no longer be able to keep our food supplies safe. The Food and Drug Administration will no longer be able to oversee drugs coming onto the market. OSHA will no longer be able to protect workers. The Consumer Product Safety Commission will no longer keep dangerous toys and consumer products off the shelves. The FTC will no longer be able to regulate monopolies. The Department of Transportation will no longer be able to come up with highway and automobile safety standards. The ATF won't be able to regulate guns. The Interior Department will lose its power over regulating drilling and mining on federal lands. The Forest Service won't be able to protect our woodlands and rivers. The Department of Labor won't be able to protect workers' rights. And on it goes. I mean, those are just the agencies that I was able to pull off the top of my head. There's a bunch of other federal agencies. Basically, what the Supreme Court said with the West Virginia versus EPA case, what Clarence Thomas has said in a dissent to another case a couple of years ago, is that if Congress creates an agency, well, let me back up a little bit. Here's how it works. Congress creates an agency, like let's take the Environmental Protection Agency as an example. Congress wrote legislation saying, we want a clean environment, so we're going to create an agency that can oversee things that might damage the environment, and that's the Environmental Protection Agency. The EPA then says, okay, we've got to establish some standards for pollutants, for atmospheric pollutants. So let's start out with carbon dioxide, for example. And so we'll bring in a group of scientists, or we've got our in-house scientists, and they'll look at the situation and they'll come up with what they think are the best solutions to the problem. They'll then bring in experts from across the board, industry experts, green experts, whatever, and they'll offer their opinions on it. They will craft an initial proposed draft, a new rule, a new EPA rule for regulating carbon dioxide. They actually did all this. They went through this whole process. That rule will then be presented to the public, and it will be available for 6 months for public comment on the website of the Environmental Protection Agency. And after 1 million or so people have commented on the rule, then the EPA will decide whether or not to put it into place. If they put it into place, then that's the new rule, right? That's the law, essentially. Well, what happened in the West Virginia versus EPA case is that the 6 corrupt Republican appointees on the Supreme Court came forward and said, the legislation that created the Environmental Protection Agency does not mention the 2 words carbon dioxide, does not mention them. And therefore, you can't regulate carbon dioxide. Now, that legislation also doesn't mention dioxins. It doesn't mention DDT. It doesn't mention dicambate. It doesn't mention any of the things that the EPA can regulate, right? And they already took away the EPA's ability to regulate carbon dioxide from power plants. So power plants are now spitting out carbon dioxide like there was no tomorrow, or there is no tomorrow. So with this new case that the Supreme Court has taken up, and by the way, this all started with Ann Gorsuch. Ronald Reagan put Ann Gorsuch in charge of the EPA back in 1981. And in her first year heading that agency, there was a 79% decline in enforcement cases, a 69% drop in cases the EPA referred to the Justice Department for prosecution, and she got a 25% cut in her own agency's budget. It took Congress years to undo the damage that Ann Gorsuch did to the EPA. And finally, she was forced to resign because of what Newsweek called, quote, a nasty scandal involving political manipulation, Superfund mismanagement, perjury, and destruction of subpoenaed documents, among other things. She resigned to avoid prosecution. Well, now her son's on the Supreme Court. And she wrote in her memoir that when she resigned, her son was very, very upset. He said, you never should have resigned. You didn't do anything wrong. You just did what Reagan ordered you to do. So, it looks like Neil Gorsuch is fixing to get his revenge. And if he does, America is going to function very differently than it has historically. This will throw us back to the pre-1930s when the first agency that came along was in 1908. It was, what is now the U.S. Department of Agriculture to oversee slaughterhouses as a result of, Sinclair Lewis's The Jungle? Or Upton Sinclair. I think it was Upton Sinclair's book. I mixed them up. But, now we've got all these regulatory agencies, and the Supreme Court looks like they want to shut them down.
That is all the time that we have for RFL today. For all of us, thanks for tuning in. We hope to see you again tomorrow. Till then.